Okay, in this video, we're going to use synthetic division to find the quotient and the remainder. I'm using the same example that I used in the previous one, in the previous video, using long division. So I should be getting the same answer with a different technique. This technique is more, you can say, is faster, it's more efficient, and the reason is simple. You don't need to do all of that repetition of dividing, multiplying, changing signs. You're not going to do any of that. But there are things here that you need to follow so that you don't end up making mistakes, even though this technique is more efficient and faster. Um, so step one, you're always going to take that divisor here and you're going to set it equal to 0 and you're going to solve for the divisor. So you get plus 2 plus 2. So you get x equals 2. That's basically the first thing that I want you to do here. Second, I want you here to find what is the highest degree of the given equation. In this case, the highest degree is n equals to 3. And what I want you to do is, to the highest degree, is to always minus 1. So in this case, it's going to be 3 minus 1 equals 2. And keep that in mind, because we're coming back to this. Keep that in mind. Now for step 2, is basically the setup. Step 2 is basically the setup. How are you going to set up the example? Number 1, make sure that nothing is missing when you're going from the highest degree to the smallest one, like in here. You go from the third power to the second power, x to the first, and the constant here. So nothing is missing. If nothing is missing, you're only going to write down the coefficient. So in here, you have 2, negative 3, negative 5, and positive 6, or just 6. And then you're going to have like a small corner here. In there, I'm going to write down now the answer that I got from the divisor, which is going to be what? 2. So once again, make sure that no term is missing here, because if that happens, then you need to replace it with 0. And if you don't do that, you're not going to get a correct answer. But this one is good to go. Again, it's 3, 2, first power, number, everything is good. And the coefficients are 2, negative 3, negative 5, and 6. And what we did here for step 1, when you solve the divisor, we got 2, and you write it down there. All right, the next thing that you're going to do next is draw a line there. And now, whatever leading coefficient you have in here, just bring it down. Just bring it down. And after that, what you're going to do is, remember the number from the divisor here, whatever number is here, when you bring this one down, just multiply them. 2 times 2 is 4, and then you write it below the second number you have in here, the second term. And all you're going to do is just put them together. And I know some of you might be wondering, all right, so what I'm supposed to do? Or subtract? Actually, the sign of the number below, since 2 times 2 is positive 4, I know I'm going to add 4. But if you multiply these two numbers and you get a negative, then you're going to subtract. So just put them together. Negative 3 plus 4 is positive 1. And now what you're going to do next, the same thing, using this number here. This is the key now. 2 times 1 is 2. What is negative 5 now plus 2? Negative 3 here. And once again, you're going to use the key here. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. 6 take away 6 is 1. 0. Believe it or not, the example is already done. It's already done. Finished. The only thing you need to do now is, how is that you're going to write down the quotient? Because you know you're not going to leave it that way. What you're going to do is go back to step 1. If you recall in step 1, besides you solving for the divisor, I told you to write down, always write write down the highest degree. In this case was 3, and 2 is minus 1. You see these two right here now is telling you, because you're going to put variables starting here. See with the 2, you're going to say here now 2x to the second, because that's the number that you got after you minus 1 from the highest degree. And all you're going to do now is just follow the order descending from the exponent. What follow x to the second? X. So the next one should be plus 1x. What follow x to the first? Just basically that constant there with no variable. And that last number here is always going to be your remainder. So if you look here, you can just say here, so what is my remainder? 0. Remember, you have the option to say here plus the remainder always over the divisor, and this should be your final answer. And remember, one way to write down the answer is for you to say here that quotient is equal to this here, and then the remainder equals to 0 there. And again, and if you go to the previous video, that's the same answer that we got, but if you recall, we needed to do a lot of work to get the answer. So let me recap here quickly before I go to the next one. So number 1 again, step 1, make sure that you take the divisor and you set it equal to 0 and you solve it. And then that number is the number that you're going to set up in this corner here. After that, you're going to look into the equation here and make sure that no term is missing, because if one term is missing when you're going in descending order, you need to replace it with 0. In here, it was not needed because everything is good. So we have 2, -3, -5, 6. After that, if you look here, you always bring down whatever number is 0 down, and then you start multiplying and combine, multiply, combine, multiply, combine until you get here. But how are you writing your final answer? We go back over to step 1. You go to the original problem and go, what is your highest degree? In this case, it's 3 here, so you write it down. But you always go into -1. You see, because that's basically telling you that's going to be the power of the variable that you're going to use in the beginning for your final answer. So that's why this here now is 2x to the second. This here basically is plus 1x minus 3. And don't forget the last number here is always going to be the remainder. And that's basically the final answer. So let's go to the next one using that same approach. So let's go to step 1. I'm going to take the divisor, which is x plus 2 equal to 0. I'm going to solve it. In here, I got this time -2. Just like how I did before. All right, this one is the same type. What is the highest degree here? N equals to 3 here. So what is that you're going to do to the power? You're going to -1. So 3 minus 1 equals to 1, 2. Because you know we will go back to that to finish the example later on. But now let's go and set up the problem. If you look here, this equation, if you look into the order, is like third power, second power. But if you notice what is missing, the x to the first power is missing. You have the constant, which is good. So when you're doing the setup now in here, what is the coefficient of x cubed? Even though when you don't see it, it's 1. What is the coefficient of x to the second? It's 2. But here, since the x to the first power is missing, you're going to replace it with 0. And then this -1 is good to go. And in here, don't forget, you always set up step 1. And just like how we did before, you always bring down this number here, the leading coefficient, which is basically 1. And you start just multiplying here. So -2 times 1 is -2. 2 minus 2 give you 1, 0. -2 times 0 give you 0. When you combine this here, you get 0 once again. -2 times 0 give you 0, but when you combine this here, you get -1. But just like before, how we're going to write down the final answer here? Remember, we're going to start with the second power. So this should be 1 x to the second. If you notice, this is basically 0, so it's optional. But if you want to write it down, it's going to be like 0x. That constant here is also going to be 0. So technically, this is my only quotient that I got here. But again, if you want to write it down, you're not going to basically get in trouble, you can say. You can just say here, plus 0x plus 0. And now what is that remainder here? Negative 1 over the divisor, which is x plus 2. Again, that's one way to write down the answer. But you know the other way is for you to say quotient equals to x to the second and remainder equals to negative 1. And that's basically the end. So I really hope that this helped you here. I know that this is not a prettiest answer, but hey, sometimes that's the way it is here. And by the way, sometimes if you want to check your work, all you need to do is basically take that quotient here and multiply by that divisor, and then you add the remainder, and you should be able to get our original problem. I just don't have the space to do that here. But if you multiply here, again, you see x to the second times x plus 2, right? Actually, let's try. Look. X to the second times x is x cubed. X to the second times 2 is 2x to the second. And then if you add a remainder, you get that same problem there. See, I can do the same thing here. If you multiply that quotient here by the divisor, and then you add, actually in this case, this one is a good one because there is no remainder. So if you multiply that quotient here with that divisor, you should be able to get the original function there. And that tells you that the example is good 100%. I hope that this helped you out, and wait for the next video. Take care.